Well, hey, Dave Melinda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. I got a simple word that is like so overused, and I really want to do a deep dive on this word today. But the question really is if you were the most trusted in your industry, how much better off would your business be? And the word is trust. And again, it's overused. And so I found somebody that is going to do a great service to us today and do a deep dive on this from what it's like to have trust on your team, as well as what it's like to have trust with your customer. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Natalie Doyle Oldfield. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You are the president at Success Through Trust. So fill us in on what Success Through Trust is.
Well, we that's the name of our company, and we focus on helping business owners, leaders, and managers grow their business by building unshakable trust with their customers, by becoming the most trusted in their industry.
Well, I love that piece. I mean, I just kind of it kind of rolled off without thinking much about it, and then I actually had to stop and think about it, Natalie, and I'm like, wow, that's like a big challenge to be the most trusted in your industry.
Absolutely.
So
And
I kind of want to start with a challenge to the listener today is just think about your industry that you're in,
Mhm.
and take a moment and kind of think about if that industry was to give out trust awards or, where would you be in that? Are you even visible in that spot? And that's that can be really daunting. So we're going to unpack that today with Natalie. Thanks for hanging out with us today and help me understand when you talk about trust. This is such a basic question, but what does trust really mean in the workplace today?
Oh, that's a big question. In the workplace, in the eyes of an employee or a leadership team, trust is a faith or belief that the team is going to be a safe space, that everyone's going to do the right thing for each other, that everyone's going to have each other's back, that people are going to do what they say they're going to do.
Simple
And
things, right? That back in
simple
the day,
things.
right? They just kind of
Yeah.
like they were kind of like entry level, do what you're gonna say you're gonna do, a safe place. Those just seem like so elementary, but why is it so hard to find that in today's workplace?
Well, that's a great question. Why is it so hard to find? I think one of the challenges, Dave, is that people are more skeptical than and critical than ever before. Since the worldwide pandemic,
Okay.
we have a lot more uncertainty. And
Yeah,
the opposite of uncertainty is trust. And so when
sure.
there's uncertainty, we have an erosion of trust. And, you know, it's that's one reason. I think the other thing is we have so much more access to information than we did, say, 10 years ago.
Sure.
And we're skeptical because of AI. We're skeptical because we think people aren't being transparent. And we're really demanding more accountability. So in the workplace,
Yeah.
we come with all of this, and so now we really need to be more intentional and deliberate about building relationships of trust. And when I say we, I don't really mean the royal we. I actually mean, the leadership teams do, the
Sure.
owners do, the managers do, the people on the front line do. And when we
Yeah.
have trust inside our team, we actually outperform. And if you think about a team that you've ever been on in your life, whether it's a sports team or a team at work, and everybody was tight knit and you're all connected and you're all working well and you had high trust. You probably didn't call it that, but you had high trust.
Sure.
You're more innovative, you're more engaged.
Yeah.
Because of that, you have you excel at providing great service to your customer, whether your customer is a member or a subscriber or a client or
Sure.
a patient or a homeowner.
Yeah.
And all that seeps out. I I got into this business when you asked, what does success through trust do?
Yeah.
I give you a high level answer. Well, I'm
Yeah.
just going to dive for a little bit. I got into this business because I wanted to do research into how is it that customers decide to buy. So I did a lot of research, Dave, and did my master's degree and graduate research to really try to understand like what makes people tick. How are some companies successful and some not? And
Sure.
how do I decide to buy? And in doing all this research and learning that trust is the factor, that is the factor to success,
Mm.
I learned a lot and learned that Google actually did a study. They called it Project Aristotle of 180 teams because they were trying to find out the question that you asked,
Yeah.
how is it that teams are so trustworthy? Like what are the most high performing teams? What are the key
Sure.
ingredients? Well, the key ingredient of a high performance team, the key ingredient is trust.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so important. That's one of the reasons.
Sure. Sure.
You
Wow.
know,
Well,
the
yeah.
the other reason, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I want to hear the other reason. Go
Well,
for it.
I just get so excited about this, as you can
This is
see. The
awesome.
other reason we kind of talked about earlier, before we started this podcast, is it also drives customer engagement, right? And it drives sales and revenue and performance.
That's and the odd thing about that, Natalie, is that's really the formula that I found when I did my uh Growing on Purpose, my book. We talk about, the how to strengthen your team. If you strengthen
Yes.
your team and you improve your customer experience, that profit is an automatic. And it's
Yeah.
so crazy to think that so many things about trust don't actually cost money. And, I mean, for people that are listening right now, I found I love this research because the thought process is, what's the ROI on this,
Yeah.
And I tell you, high trust in the workplace from the research that I've seen, you get up to 50% more productivity.
Yes.
So if somebody's listening right now and they're like, my team's not being productive, our margins are slipping, our customers are migrating, if you start looking at some of these things, it is it hard to make the connection with trust because a lot of people are going to just try to lower prices, fire the
Yeah.
team, they're going to try to put a band-aid on rather than look at the stuff that we're talking about. Do you run into people, Natalie, that struggle with understanding that trust equals engagement, like you just mentioned?
Uh, yes, I did. When I started my business almost 12 years ago, I did a lot more than I do now. However, I actually wrote about this in my book that's launching today.
Yes,
So
congratulations.
the book is called Trusted: The Proven Path to Customer Loyalty and Business Growth. And in the introduction, I actually write about what you just said because I do run into it, Dave. And they're common business problems, like you mentioned, that all come down to trust. So we recognize these problems and we think, okay, well, we might have flat revenue or customer complaints, or maybe a customer's ghosting us, or they don't want to meet with us, or all of a sudden they say, you know what, we're changing our whole approach to procurement and we're going to go to a request for proposal process. These are all signals. These are indicators of low customer trust.
Fair.
And some companies recognize it, others don't. Trust is a huge enabler to business, and it's a huge barrier.
Yeah.
And I do have clients that will call me and say, you know what, we hear that you're the business trust expert. And we have all these leads coming in and we're not closing. Is that something you do? And I say,
Mm.
well, what do you mean? Is that something I do? Like, is that something you can fix?
Fix this
And I,
for me, Natalie, will you? Come on, in
know,
2 minutes.
and so, we really, best case scenario, we actually diagnose and survey the company's clients or customers, stakeholders, using a proprietary diagnostic that I built called the Client Trust Index, and that
Hmm.
actually measures a company's trust equity. So I'm reminded by some very close, dear friends that trust equity is a technical term. So they always say to me, don't say that. Well, here's the thing. Trust equity is a term that I coined a long time ago in 2011 to really be the amount of trust a customer has in a company. And if you think about a house, we know that we put equity into a house, right? We buy the house, we add on to it, or we keep it upgraded. We might add some landscaping. After several years, we might have to do another, paint a few rooms. We're putting equity into the house. It's just like
Sure.
a relationship with a customer. And when you have trust equity with a customer, you don't have the complaints. Or if you do have the complaints, the customer might be more forgiving. And if something goes wrong, they're going to let it slide or maybe be a
Sure.
bit more understanding.
Yeah.
So it's really, best case scenario, a company would actually measure the trust equity, and you can measure trust. I'll say that again. You
Yeah.
can measure trust.
Wow.
Because so many people say to me, well, what
Yeah.
is the ROI, like you did? Well, you can
Sure.
measure it, and it's directly linked. I have found in my research that is based in academia and tested externally, it's all evidence-based, that it's directly related to the continuation to buy products and services, retention of customers. It's linked to recommendations and, of course, satisfaction, pleasure with the relationship. And when when a company comes to me and says, okay, we have all these leads, but something's happening, I usually, if best case scenario, will say, well, let's measure, like I said. But
Yeah.
oftentimes it's just tell me what's happening. Tell me about the people that are talking to your customers and what the process is. And one of the things I found, and I'm sure you found in your research too, Dave, is that it all comes down to the people,
Right.
right?
Yep.
And it's, like I said, it's an enabler, but trust is enabler, but it's also a barrier. So if the people talking to the prospect or the new potential customer are not building trust, the company's not going to buy from you, or the
Yeah.
person's not going to buy from you.
And I think that's interesting because I want to circle back a little bit because we need to really focus in on the leaders, like you mentioned before. I
Yes.
run into people that try to, if my team trusted more, they try to push it off on the team. And it's like, from a leadership perspective, you're the one that's got to start this. So if you're
Yep.
listening today and you're a leader of a team, a company, your family, whatever, it's got to start with you because, migration, teams leave because of lack of trust, engagement, disappears when trust disappears. I mean, another cool stat is employees who trust leaders are 61% more likely to stay with that company.
Yeah.
So, think about that. If you're listening right now and you're having a hard time keeping your team intact, whether it's, people are leaving, whether you're terminating, whether they're migrating to your competitor, 61% of them. So I always say this, team of 10, six of those people will stay longer and healthier and productive if there's trust there. So
That's
I
right.
don't want to just gloss over this because I think this is a big blind spot. here, Natalie, where people are like, oh, we have trust. We all trust each other. But like you said, safe space is what I wrote down. How safe is your company? How safe does your team feel? We always think of that thing in the 70s where you would lean back and someone would catch you, and all that must be what trust is. So I'm just curious, when you said that about if you were the most trusted in your industry, how much better would your business be? What does that look like? What are some simple ways that a leader listening can build trust with his team or her team right now?
They they could start by paying attention. So, to your point, Dave, and I really want to reiterate because you've said some incredibly insightful, important things. It starts with the leader, and it starts with the leader, whether it's the owner, the manager, the team leader, paying attention and recognizing that it is a leadership imperative. It is a skill. We can all learn to be trustworthy, and we all need to look in the mirror, leaders do, and be more intentional about it. So, you know, I say at a high level, start by paying attention, but really step number one is to listen
Oh,
carefully with empathy and compassion and involve people on your team in discussions and conversations that affect them and impact them. Right? Trust is two ways. So we have to have mutual understanding. And so I would say for a leader, step one is listening, which is also principle number one to building trust, but it's also extending trust first. So if you're a leader, the leader needs to extend trust first. And some of us do that naturally, and some of
yeah,
us don't.
yeah.
However, when you're a leader, you need to give people the benefit of doubt and act in their best interest. And like I said, extend trust first.
Well, and I think it's interesting because we do a ton of work with DISC and EQ. And when you look at a person's personality, some people, like you said, Natalie, are naturally trusting, and some
Yes,
people are naturally skeptical. So if you're a naturally skeptical person, the earlier that you admit that you understand that you realize it, and you quite frankly have to work through that. Because like for
right.
me, I'm a naturally trusting person, so it's easy for me to trust my team. It might be completely opposite for somebody listening because they're very skeptical. You have to earn their trust,
That's
right?
right.
Where and some people you can earn it in a short amount of time. Some people it takes a long time. And if somebody's listening right now and they struggle with that piece, I mean, it's like kind of natural. So I want to give you a get out of jail free card, but I want you to be cognizant that in this situation, you need to find a way to trust your people because if they don't trust you and you don't trust them, the engagement numbers are off the charts when you look at the work that Gallup did on that. And
Yeah.
it shows just like crazy. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that natural trusting versus somebody that's naturally skeptical.
Well, I'm really glad you asked. Like you, I do a lot of work in emotional intelligence, and am certified in emotional intelligence. And I truly believe that trust is a skill that we can learn. So I do think, excuse me, some are natural. However, I think for people that are skeptical, as you said, and I
Yeah,
know lots of people who are skeptical,
sure.
you, you actually can learn to be more open and more trustworthy.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important for people listening to understand because if it's hard to grasp, it
Yeah,
doesn't give you the ability to go like, well, then they got to trust. I don't have to, right? And this is where I'm almost to the point in my career. and in my coaching and my consulting, where it's like if somebody doesn't want to trust their team, I really question if they're in the right seat when it comes to leadership. Because if
Well,
how do you do
yeah,
that if they're not willing to trust somebody? How do you
yeah.
possibly build that company and move that forward, you know?
Well, so I will share a story with you and hopefully a tip to help you if you
Sure.
come in that
Yeah, absolutely.
situation again. So I have a program. So I mentioned I do customer research and customer sentiment. I really kind of do three things. So um, I said success through trust is all about helping companies grow their business. And I do that by helping them build unshakable trust and helping them become the most trusted.
Mhm.
Well, there's three ways and three sort of areas I do that. I measure a company's trust equity with their customers. The other thing that I do is I speak to groups and conferences to educate them and give them and company events to give them a vocabulary and a playbook to build trust. The third thing that I do a lot of, Dave, is I have a program called Trust Mastery. And that's where leaders and up and coming leaders um, go through a program that I offer. And we actually walk through and learn how to build trust. So I guide them along. So when you said, how do you deal with someone who's skeptical? Well, it made me think of a fellow that I worked with whose first name is Bob. Okay. So Bob was one of those people that was so skeptical, and his manager of this cybersecurity firm said to me, I don't know what we're going to do. Customers are complaining about him, and he seems to be cavalier and not really care how he speaks to senior people. And the customer that complained to us, I write about this in my book, Trusted, they actually said, we're going to leave and find another company to work with if you don't deal with him, if you don't
Mm.
fix his communication issue.
Sure.
So I spoke with them. I talked to Bob, and he enrolled in our program that I call Trust Mastery. And I'll jump right to the chase. He learned to listen more intently. We all think we're great listeners. I mean, if someone asked me if I was a great listener, I would say sure, and I would
Yeah.
hold up my hand. But I could
Yep.
tell you, sometimes, Dave, my husband would say, "You're not. I told you that I wanted you to do this, this, and this, or I told
Yep.
you that we were going to meet here and go to dinner with these people." And I'd be
Yep.
like, "Oh, yeah."
Yeah.
We all strive to be good
Sure.
listeners.
Yep.
Well, Bob wasn't even aware that he was finishing his customers' sentences. He thought that he knew what they were going to say because all
Sure.
customers are the same, all
Yep.
this stuff. But really, what transformed Bob, which might transform these people you're talking about, is he learned how to be empathetic. He learned that empathy is about understanding the other person's perspective, their
Right.
situation. And I really believe that leaders who are empathetic get a whole new view, and it actually reduces skepticism. And this is what happened to Bob.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned, it is in my book. I didn't talk about in my book that it actually reduced his skepticism, but it did.
Sure.
He actually thought that all customers had the same problems.
Yep.
He thought a customer complaint was a customer ticket, not a
Sure.
person on the other end.
Sure.
Right.
Yep.
And I think that there's some fatigue, if you will, with leaders that they forget that there's a person on the other end.
Sure.
And it's in all our businesses, in all industries, that when we become more empathetic, we actually can change our whole view. And the transformation happened to Bob because we were doing this exercise about a typical day in the life of a client. And I asked Bob to choose a real customer of that company. And then we work through it. And I have this exercise that I do in the Trust Mastery program called empathy mapping. And I'm telling you, it literally was like a light bulb went on for him. And we were on Zoom like you and I are.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
there's like 10 little faces on Zoom and in this group program. And he literally said, "Oh my gosh, like my customer's just like me. I
Yeah.
can't believe I never thought about it that way." And sometimes we forget that customers are actually people.
Yeah.
Companies are made up of people, and they are just like us. And I really do believe, I believe in my heart of hearts, Dave. My sisters call me and say I'm so like positive all the time, but really, if if we if we think, what is it really like in their situation, and we dive
Sure.
deep,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You actually do get a whole new view. And I do think that it helps combat skepticism. I really
Sure.
do. And
Wow. That's
let's face
great.
it, I mean, we as customers, do we want to buy from someone who's skeptical?
No, no,
Really?
no, not at all.
You
No, I
know?
totally get it. Yeah, this is a great spot. When we come back from break, I want to unpack the customer side. We've been
Okay.
talking about trust in the workplace with the team. So I want to transition over. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Thanks.
Welcome back. I'm honored to be hanging out with Natalie Doyle Oldfield. She's the president at Success Through Trust, and we have been unpacking trust today. And we asked the question at the beginning of the show: if you were the most trusted in your industry, how much better would your business be? And we've been focusing the first part of the show on improving your team. Now I want to look at this from the customer side. So when you talk about the customer trust index, can you kind of help us with what that looks like, and how we are able to get a number out of that, so to speak?
Sure. Sure. Uh, the Client Trust Index is a diagnostic. It's evidence-based, and it's a survey. So we measure a company's customers' sentiment. So the survey takes about 9 minutes or so, Dave, and
Okay.
there are statements that a customer would answer about the company and what it's like to be a customer of that company, about how they communicate, how they behave, and how they serve. And then you get a quantifiable trust equity score. And as I mentioned, trust equity is a coin that I termed a long time ago that really is a measurement, quantifiable measurement of a customer's trust in a company. And for many of my clients, it becomes a key performance indicator. And
Sure.
as we all know, it started a long time ago by Peter Drucker, but what gets managed can be measured. Or said
Sure.
another way, what we measure, we can manage.
Sure.
And I really believe that the key performance indicator that we should all be measuring is trust equity. What is it that our customers think? And when we know what their trust equity is, this is a predictor of your future success. It's actually the number one predictor of future success.
Sure. Wow, that's awesome. Well, and I think as you hinted at before the break, Natalie, we're all customers, we're all consumers as well.
Yes.
So, when there is a restaurant that, has an outbreak of some type of whatever,
Yeah.
that the poison or whatever, food poisoning type thing, you know, who's the first one to go back, after
Mhm.
this, hey, we're fixed now, come on back, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it takes a long time to build that trust, and quite frankly, sometimes it probably never gets rebuilt. And I'm
Yes.
just curious, what is the research or what have you found that, is that like we're looking for it if we build it as consumers, we feel good about that trust. If it's broken like
Yes.
once, is it repairable? Do you see a big migration? What have you seen when it comes to that kind of stuff in that world?
It is repairable.
Okay,
Uh, Sometimes it really depends what happens.
sure.
So, you know, trust is fragile. I'll start with that. Your
Okay.
trust equity is fragile. However, it's paradoxical. It's also really strong. We can build trust equity up, which is why, I'm always focused on companies should always be building, managing, and protecting. Because when you are always focused on building relationships of trust with customers, same applies for employees, but we're
Hmm.
talking about customers now.
Yep.
When
Yep.
you're always focused on that, then when and if you do make a mistake, which every business will, then you have a cushion, if you will, and you have understanding from your customers, and you can repair it. Oftentimes, I have seen, actually, in my town where I live, we actually have a really popular restaurant that's busy 7 days a week, starting at noon every day until midnight every
Wow.
single day. And you have
Nice.
to book several weeks out to get there.
Oh,
And they actually had um, an outbreak. Now, I'm going to say, I can't, it wasn't food poisoning, but it was, and I'm going to get it wrong, but I won't say the name of the restaurant. But
sure. No.
where I live in Halifax, Nova Scotia, we have a lot of cruise ships that come in. It's a
Okay.
beautiful town. Okay. It's
Sure.
a beautiful
Sure.
town, Dave. And we had, so we always have in the summertime and the fall, especially, thousands of passengers walking
Sure.
around the downtown core. Anyway, all this to say, this restaurant that's really busy, famous here, great food, amazing atmosphere, had an outbreak it of this flu, let's say. And it was linked back to a cruise passenger.
Hmm.
And they they did all the right things. So they shut the restaurant down. They put out on social media anyone who's been here, everyone that had made a reservation, because we have this system that you can make reservations in. They
Sure.
contacted, they told them everybody about how they cleaned it up and how they were going to fix the problem. They
Sure.
regained trust. In fact, I would say they're actually busier now than they were before.
Wow. Yeah.
So, there's actually there's this one of the principles that I talk about in my new book, Trusted, the proven path to customer loyalty and business growth, is do the right thing. And if you make a mistake, fix it. So
Yeah.
this principle of building trust outlines in my book all the things that, you can do if you make a mistake, and all the steps to take, best practices to fix it.
Sure.
And they followed all this. This restaurant did. Now, I work primarily with companies that are in the business to business space.
Hmm.
So it's very similar. I mean, a restaurant is actually a really good example, though, because if you think about it, they have to do things right every single day, every single meal, every single
Right.
person,
Yep.
right?
Exactly. Yep.
And if you don't, you know, we tell all our friends. So
Yeah.
there's this statistic that 80% of us worldwide buy from companies we trust.
Mm.
We buy their products and services.
Sure.
Worldwide, we pay more for products and services we trust.
Sure. Yep.
So, if you think about what are some of the most trusted coffee companies in the world? Well, Starbucks is, and we pay
Yep.
more for Starbucks because we
Sure.
trust them.
Yep.
there are lots of other examples. Tim Hortons in Canada, trusted brand. But all these companies at some point make a mistake. It's about fixing things in a way
Sure.
that you're proud of so that you can regain the trust. And the mistakes for some people don't have to be that big. I mean,
Yeah.
it could be missing a deadline. It could be, pronouncing someone's name wrong. It
Right.
could be, missing a feature in a software upgrade that you told all your clients was going to be there and then for some reason wasn't there.
Yeah.
So
Well,
we all
I
make mistakes. It's about fixing them in a way that you're proud
yeah.
of so you can
Right.
regain.
Well, and I think that the word that comes to my mind is like take ownership of it. I mean, it's so easy to blame your distributor in that case. There could have been so many things that that restaurant could have done. Blame the cruise ship, blame this, blame
Yes,
that, right? I mean, if you've, offended a customer, if you've mistreated a customer, you know what? Just take ownership of it. I feel like
100%.
taking ownership, being vulnerable, falling on that sword to where it's like, you know what, I made a mistake. I'm really sorry. Can we work through this?
Yes.
I feel like that's way more forgivable than, somebody told me your name wrong. Come up with all these reasons to pass blame. So, I mean, is there kind of a process or a path to fixing it if something happens? Is there anything in your book that talks about that? Try to
Yes.
repair that at all?
Yes, there is. And it starts with what you said, take ownership. It starts with, stating this is what happened and this is what went wrong. It's being accountable. So you're
Yeah,
100% bang on. That's where it starts. And then the next step, of course, would be to inform everybody that is involved of what's going on. And it starts with the team. It starts with the staff, right? It
yeah,
starts with the employees. That's where we always have to start so that they know. And then it's about letting people know the stakeholders who have been affected what you're going to do. And in very specific detail, let them know. The more specific you can be, the better, because clarity always inspires trust. So
yeah.
be specific and apologize with empathy, right? And empathy, as we talked about before the break, it's understanding how it may have affected the other person, understand their situation.
Yeah.
And so that's how it goes. And, keep people and then, continue on until it's finished, let them know the timeline. So I actually have all the guidelines in my book, Trusted, of the steps to take when there is a mistake or something goes wrong or there is a crisis.
And it's so good to have that upfront rather than I see a lot of companies, Natalie, that wait until they're in that crisis to figure out how to fix it.
Yes.
So if I'm understanding what you're saying, then is there is a path that you've created. And I think that it makes sense for it's kind of like, on that cruise ship, they tell you what to do if that cruise ship is sinking. They don't wait until it's sinking to tell you, hey, this is your lifeboat, this is where your life preserver is, all
Yes,
that, right? I mean, it's the same
exactly.
thing here. I don't want to confess it over people, but it's gonna happen in a lot of cases. I mean, I think about Tylenol back whenever they had such a bad scare, but look at how well they created a path to success. They stayed in business, and
Yes.
did well. So they obviously had either a contingency plan. They already knew this plan when something goes wrong. So I guess it's kind of like having a contingency plan for this,
100%.
and know
Yeah.
that it might happen. So I'm just curious what your
Yeah.
thoughts are.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that in addition to knowing all the steps, I would agree with you that you want to have a plan. You want to be proactive and have a plan so that when and if something does go wrong. And I work with a lot of companies in the middle of something going wrong, but I work with many about, okay, let's outline what are the critical trust risk points? What are the things that could happen? And then we put a plan in place ahead of time, like you said, of what to do when and if something happens. I love that you mentioned the Tylenol study because it's a seminal case study. It's a great study to bring up, Dave. So, in my first book, The Power of Trust, I actually have a number of case studies of companies that did, a great job building trust or regaining trust or protecting trust. And I talk about Johnson and Johnson because they did do a wonderful job. And what's really incredible about that case study is we all remember that it all came back to what the company's purpose was, right? It all came back to we want to do the best thing for the patients and protect them and do whatever we can to have a quality, safe product out there. So they
Yep.
did all the steps to do that. And it's just a wonderful case study because, in your work, they went right back to their credo. And one of their values was to do the right thing.
And that's, I mean, if that's how you become the most trusted in your industry, by doing the right thing, by
Yeah.
saying what you're going to do, by having other people like secretly wish they were you because you're in that spot where you're so trusted in your industry there. So we could do this all day. This is so much fun. I got a couple questions before I let you
Yeah.
go. Um, Tip of the day for somebody listening, Natalie. Maybe it's something that you covered, maybe it's something that's on your heart that you haven't shared, but what would your tip of the day be for somebody listening?
My tip of the day is that everyone on your team has a part to play in the customer's decision to trust. We all have a part to play. It's not just one
Yeah.
person. It's not about the leader or the customer facing people. It's everybody has a part to play, Dave. So we
Well, I'm
can
glad there's
all
not a
learn.
trust department, right? Like customer service department. I'm glad there's not like a trust department. So,
I'm
that's so
starting to
cool.
see that though, Dave. It's amazing. I'm
Uh-oh.
actually starting to see that. It's so that's my one tip of the day. I
Yeah,
think the other tip that I would have, if you allow me to
sure.
have two tips,
I
because
will, absolutely.
as you know, it's a big day for me because this
It
is the day
is.
that my book, Trusted, the Proven
Yep,
Path to Customer Loyalty and Business Growth, is being launched. I think
yep,
the other tip of the day is that when you actually apply the 8 principles of trust, we've talked about many of them today, you actually can become the most trusted. And when you are the most trusted, it is the path to success and loyalty
yeah.
and revenue growth and retention and referrals and business success.
Those are like all the things that people want. And, if it starts at trust, it seems almost too simple. And yet that's the trunk of the tree is trust. And then there's all this stuff out there. So I love that. Thanks for the two tips there. So for somebody that wants to pick up your book today, where would they find it? What's the best place for them to grab a copy?
They can find Trusted on Amazon today.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
So just go on Amazon and then search for either your name or trusted, and then
Yeah.
that'll show up. And hopefully, we'll get a bunch of people that'll jump on that. It sounds like a great book. Appreciate that. For somebody that is interested in connecting with you, Natalie, maybe something that we talked about today, they're having a question. They want to learn more about the client trust index. They want to learn more about the trust equity that we talked about. What's the best way for people to connect with you?
You can go to my website, which is successthroughtrust.com. And there I have information about the Client Trust Index, the Trust Mastery Program, and my book. You can also find me on LinkedIn, and I'd love to connect with you there. And on LinkedIn, I'm Natalie Doyle Oldfield. And I also have information about me there. And like I said, on Amazon.com.
Awesome. Thank you. This is so cool. I love this topic. I love talking about the team connection to the customer. I think that that's going to be a great read. I can't wait to get a copy myself to be able to make sure that my book aligns with yours because I just, I don't want to be saying the wrong thing out there.
Oh, I think it does. I think
You're
it
the
does.
expert, so I'm excited to learn. So thank you so much for all you're doing in this space and can't wait to keep learning from you.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate you having me, and have a wonderful day.